You're listening to Across the Pondcast. Cybersecurity rants and war stories from both sides of the Atlantic.
Hello and welcome to Across the Pondcast, a show where we talk and occasionally rant about cybersecurity topics with perspectives from both sides of the Atlantic. I am Tib3rius. I'm joined, as always, by my top 10 co-host, Mr. Andy Swift. Andy, how are you doing?
I'm all right. The other 9 were not available today, hence why I am here. Top 10. At least I made the top 10.
I didn't say which number you were.
That's very true.
But it's 4.
But I'm going to make an assumption it's somewhere mid-table.
Yeah.
Perfect. I'll take it. You know what? I'll take it. I've had worse.
Wait, how many other podcasts are you on?
Wouldn't you like to know?
Oh, goodness.
It's the only cybersecurity one.
Okay, good. Right, as long as you're not cheating on me with other cybersecurity podcasts.
Oh, no, of course not. No, of course not. There's my knitting monthly one. And
You gotta say, even though I have been on a number of cybersecurity podcasts. So,
you damn hypocrite.
This is the only one I host, though. Other than maybe the one I kind of do with Track It Pacer, but that's more of a Twitch live show that we do infrequently. Called Tech Talk, if you're listening. Here we go. We don't have a sponsor of this episode, I don't think. But, Tech Talk. A semi-infrequent Twitch/YouTube podcast with Track It Pacer. Where we just randomly talk about whatever we want.
It's good.
Yeah.
It's good.
It is good.
I like tuning in just to hear people talking. It's fun.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to talk about the OWASP Top 10.
Yes.
Yeah.
Again.
Have we talked about it before?
On the podcast? No.
Yeah. I think...
Have you and I? Yes. Probably every time a new release candidate comes out.
Mm-hmm.
You get very animated, sometimes very angry, and I remember various outbursts within the office when we used to work together in the UK. It was very exciting. I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the debate that followed as well, quite often. So yeah, interested to see where this one goes. Bit of a trip down memory lane.
Well, I don't know if I ranted too much about it back in goodness, when was that? 2012, 2013?
1845.
I think there was a 2013 release. I don't think I ranted about it too much because I was a fan of the OWASP Top 10 back then. I always thought it was a useful thing. And it was only, I think, with the 2017 release that I started, disliking it. And that was the release where cross-site request forgery got sort of booted off the list. Which I always thought, so I mean, maybe we should give a background. I've got the blurb here, actually, from owasptop10.org. The OWASP Top 10 is a standard awareness document for developers and web application security. It represents a broad consensus about the most critical risks to web applications. It goes on to say it started in 2003 with a starting point to help organizations with a starting point for secure development. Over the years, it's grown into a pseudo standard that is used as a baseline for compliance, education, and vendor tools. So yeah, that's the background on what it is. And their collection methodology has changed over the years. They used to ask pen test companies to submit data on the different vulnerabilities that they found, and then they would categorize those, and then they would create an OWASP Top 10. And I kind of liked that way of doing it because you got sort of real data. And, so the Top 10 wasn't sort of based on... There's a thing with ranking anything to do with risk, because they say most critical security risks. So it's not necessarily, I mean, it's a whole debate in the industry, what is risk? I kind of still, and I'll go to say, I think everyone has their own personal definition of what risk is, it seems, because it's obviously not severity, right? Because you can have something that's a critical severity that never happens, and therefore the risk is 0. And you can have something that's low severity, but always happens, or, is so frequent that, it basically is just how web apps function. And so that's also not that risky. I still, to this day, and it might just be quite naive, I still like the definition because it just seems to kind of work of risk is kind of like I'm going to do one of those squiggly equals you see in like math equations, is approximately severity times likelihood. Like you have a severity 0 to 10, you have a likelihood 0 to 10. You multiply them together, you get sort of a score that is kind of a risk.
So I a little bit of a tangent, but related to what you've just said. It is a really hard thing, risk. And I remember when you and I first started designing what was at the time called something like next gen pen testing or some marketing bullshit wording like that, which is basically like a nice pretty interface that would interpret like results from reports and things and put it into a nice sort of visual format rather than a. Do you remember this, by the way? I can't tell by your expression right now whether your face is about to light up or not.
NGP, next gen pen testing, NGPT,
yeah. Sort of something like that. So way back when that was a thing, and then the various iterations of it over the years, and we still have a kind of version of it now. Testing as a service is more what it's moved into, and a lot of other companies are starting to do the same thing now, which is kind of cool and interesting. But a lot of them have these nice dashboards on them with that exact thing of risk, or like a meter with like risk on them. And the question is always, well, what metrics are going into that? And there's been so many iterations of this, like within our own organization, of trying to discuss what metrics should be in that risk calculation. And in the end, we ended just taking it out because risk is so specific to individual organizations, and it means so many different things to different people. And then even within the context of like large organizations where you have like hundreds of applications and hundreds of different environments around that organization, what's risky to one environment might not be the same risk factor to another environment. So it's quite we sacked it off in the end, long story short, in favor of some more qualitative data that wasn't so sort of controversial, needed a lot of context and interpretation. Yeah, interesting.
I feel like maybe we didn't cover this in the CVSS episode, but like the CVSS has always been like, we don't measure risk. Like, we're not a measure of risk, but at the same time they measure severity, what you can do, and then they have like temporal and environmental metrics, which are kind of like, how likely is it?
Yeah.
And you smash those together with the formula and you get a number, and you kind of are measuring risk. I know you don't want to say it. You kind of are. The fact that the environmental score is always measurable, is always adjustable by the person who the CVSS score applies to, means that it is honestly a more personable or personal version of risk than anything else, because a CVSS score can change depending on which environment you put it in, which is kind of what you just said. So it's weird. Okay, that tangent out of the way though. So, I mean, for this episode, I feel like let's just go with severity multiplied by likelihood, right?
Okay.
Risk, because I don't know of another way to approach this. Because obviously risk, as you say, is subjective. And so if the OWASP Top 10 is trying to basically say, okay, this is a broad consensus about the most critical security risks to web applications, I don't know if you can have a broad consensus about that anyway, because risk is so subjective.
Yeah.
But there are definitely some vulnerabilities that are riskier than others.
Right.
Or in web applications, I would say. Right? And obviously there's going to be some context, but like an SQL injection is almost always high or critical risk. Yeah. There are obviously mitigating factors. Like if it's only in the admin panel, sure, then the risk goes down a bit. But the fact is the severity of an SQL injection is so high that it just makes SQL injection inherently quite a risky thing, I would argue. So where's injection on the OWASP Top 10 of 2025? It's right in the middle. It's number 5.
It's been moved. I'm just looking at the charts. Yes, it's gone down from 3 down to 5.
Yeah. And to be honest, even when it was number 3, I disagreed, because number 2 in 2021 was cryptographic failures.
Mm.
And cryptographic failures has gone down as well, but it's only gone down to number 4. So it's still so we're basically saying OWASP is basically saying that cryptographic failures are a more critical security risk than injections. And I'm not sure I'm convinced of that. Because, yes, there are tons of different cryptographic failures, but I would say that the vast majority of cryptographic failures are just not that exploitable. Like, the likelihood of exploitation is just so low. There's just, the one that just springs to mind is you have like a misconfigured SSL or TLS server, right? So like HTTPS is HTTP over a secure connection, SSL or TLS. I mean, hopefully not SSL these days, but we have to keep saying SSL because nobody knows what else to say. Years ago, I started putting TLS before SSL, and I just see SSL/TLS everywhere. It's like, okay, but can we stop referring to the one that's been deprecated for 20 years?
No one will.
No. So that's the one that springs to mind. But almost all the TLS misconfigurations I see these days require nation-state level capabilities to actually exploit. And even if you do exploit them, it's usually you're only seeing one person's data. You're hijacking one connection. Usually, it's not like you break the TLS and you can see everything. Like that can happen, obviously, but that's a whole different kind of attack. Like a lot of the time, it's attacking a single encrypted connection, which happens to be used by one user. And I mean, there's arguments that if you can do that to one person, you can do it to all, but you have to be in a specific location, right, to be able to even intercept these packets. So, like, that's the thing. Is it more of a critical security risk than injection? And I think this leads, before you answer that, I kind of want to counter my own point. And I think this is another one of the problems with the OWASP Top 10 is they moved for like in 2013, they were still using sort of mostly individual vulnerabilities. And now they've moved to almost completely, I think actually completely to categories. And I think this is one of the issues is injection is such a broad category now that how can you even make a claim about risk? Because injection covers, yes, there's SQL injection in there, and there's cross-site scripting. Well, cross-site scripting is less risky than SQL injection, arguably, but you've also got stuff like LDAP injection, which I have only ever found once. in 15 years of pen testing, I have only found LDAP injection on a web app one time, and I could barely do anything with it. So you have this other thing, which is like, okay, how are we measuring? How can we make a claim about risk when you have these categories, which in themselves have such a wide range of risk in them? So, yeah, now I'll let you talk.
Thanks, man. I'm here too. I love these like web app only type of episodes. But hey, I get my revenge in other ones, so it's all good. Yeah, being at number 5 is kind of odd, right underneath cryptographic. It's strange. I'm glad it hasn't disappeared altogether, but I think it is where it is. And the only thing I can think of is that somehow are getting reports and numbers and statistics of the fact that cryptographic failures are way more common to see. But to your point, obviously, exploiting them is the big problem. And that's the only reason I can think that it is above injection, because if you measure the whole thing in terms of risk, the top 2, at least in there for me, are actually probably quite rightly broken access control, but also injection is also got to be right up there. I would probably put that at number 2 in terms of its risk, and it's 1 or 2 possibly. I don't think any lower than that though, because it's the criticality if you do find it. And got to be honest, like in recent years, I'm probably finding a lot less of it than we ever used to. It's never changing world. I don't know about you. Yeah, you do way more web app testing than I do. Do you get that sense? But it's declining over time?
Injection specifically?
cross-site switching. Great, well done, Andy. SQL injection.
Yes, but you can still find it. So that's the thing. It's definitely it's like I this question comes up a lot actually whenever I talk about SQL injection, because like, you know, it is one of my favorite subjects to talk about. I always get comments like, haven't we solved SQL injection? I was like, yeah, we've solved it. Like, we solved it 25 years ago, I feel. The problem is there are still applications that are either legacy applications or developers that don't know how to use frameworks properly. Frameworks pretty much obliterated most SQL injection, right?
And a lot of
application frameworks that allow ORM instead of like raw queries. The issue is like you can't always use ORM. Or maybe a developer doesn't know how to properly use ORM and starts, you know, breaking stuff and just going back to raw queries. So that's the main issue with injection. But yeah, I just don't see it. Like even, you know, with injection being such a broad category as well, you still see a lot of cross-site scripting, right? Cross-site scripting hasn't gone away. There are more mitigating factors, like you have content security policies now, which can, even if you have a cross-site scripting, you can kind of neuter it with a good content security policy. But you know, injection is such a broad category. There's so many types of injection. That's the issue. So it's like, okay, why is it still below cryptographic failures? I don't know. I have my theories, and I've made like 2 videos for my YouTube channel on the OWASP Top 10, and one of the theories is, so the way they do, or one of the ways I should say, because I'm not going to claim they do this completely, but one of the ways they get the data now is they look at CVEs, and they go across the CVEs, and then they take the base CVSS scores, I believe, from the CVEs and sort of average them to get a general number of, okay, these are the CVEs in a specific category. What's the average sort of CVSS score for those? Which I think is I think I mentioned this in the video, I think is a terrible way of just getting your data in the first place, because CVEs, they are, if you look at them, there are like more high rated CVEs than there are medium and lows. And there's a big reason for that. It's that people don't generally submit CVEs that are low or medium, right? Because it's good when if you're starting out and you're finding CVEs, like that's fine. If you just want a CVE because you want it on your, you know, resume or whatever, great. But like other than that, a lot of people don't submit CVEs if the CVSS score is a low or medium, because they just don't feel it's like, oh, it's not a big enough vulnerability for a CVE. But if it's high or critical, you're going to, you know, have a higher critical. So I think, and this is going completely off memory, I think I mentioned in the video, like the average CVSS score for a CVE, I believe, is something like 6.7. So, you know, CVEs are inherently risky, I guess. And so you have this weird thing where like you're already sort of shifting your risk, even though CVSS isn't a risk rating, it kind of is a risk rating. So you're already sort of shifting your scores to the higher end of the spectrum, which is kind of silly, because if you think about it, most vulnerabilities, right? Most vulnerabilities are going to be low. Most vulnerabilities are going to be low and medium CVSS scores, like literally, because they're the most common and they don't get fixed. Right, they're easy to implement. They don't get fixed because they're so low, so they still exist. So people keep making them. So yeah, it's obvious. Like the most common vulnerabilities are always going to be the low hanging fruit, below the mediums, not the highs and the crits. But that's not what happens in CVEs anyway. So that's another thing I think is data collection. They're just the way they compile the OWASP Top 10. I think it was better when they were asking pen testing companies for the vulnerabilities, because they got more, I think they got a more broader range, because when you're a pen test company, you don't just submit the highs and criticals, you submit the lows, the mediums, etc.
Yeah, everything. Yeah, that's undoubtedly part of a problem. If you're working on research for cryptographic failures as well, like the majority of what you find is going to be pretty bad anyway. If you find something, it's going to be very much CVE worthy. If you've done something that just blows apart like some kind of like crypto protocol, that's going to be big news one way or another. If you find just like an injection in something, yeah, you can see why a lot of people don't report those sorts of things, and why that would skew some data. Absolutely. So yeah, I don't think that's a very good measure whatsoever. No. But yeah, the important thing is that it is on the top 10. so yeah. This is one of the things I wanted to talk about as well, is the use case for the top 10 for pen testing companies. So I love that sound. It's that disapproving sound. I think we're going to agree on this though, in the end. We usually do. I see a lot of companies using it as a kind of, what do you do in your web app testing? Well, we cover the OWASP Top 10, and they kind of leave it there. Now, I have mixed feelings about this, and I'm definitely, admittedly, sat on the fence with this one, because I can see it from both sides of the world. A lot of clients tend to A, confuse themselves, B, don't really know what's in the top 10 to begin with, and a lot of them like to have a nice checklist to know that we're actually going to, kick the wheels, we're going to check the fluids, basically do a nice MOT on their application. But the problem with that is that the OWASP Top 10 is a little bit of a weird place. It doesn't encompass everything. It doesn't encompass every single attack known to man. And yeah, I kind of like it from one way, but not another.
So I used to feel that way.
Oh.
And I still do, at like let's say a philosophical level. I agree with you. I think it's silly when people are like, oh, we test the OWASP Top 10, because it kind of sounds like, oh, we're only testing 10 things, which I always think is silly.
Yeah.
Well, but the problem with the OWASP Top 10, then now, and this is another thing I ranted about the video, it's not a top 10. It is everything now. That's the problem. Like, I think it covers something like, it covers like 60%. I want to say 60%, or it is between 40 and 60% of CVEs are in the top 10, are covered by the top 10. And that excludes a bunch of the non-web CVEs, right? Because CVEs aren't just web. There are tons of, CWEs, I should say. So CWEs are the sort of weakness categories, and there's like over 1,000 of them. And they use the CWEs in the OWASP Top 10 to sort of, they bunch them together into these categories. But I think there's a ridiculous number that's covered in the OWASP Top 10. And so it practically is these days all the web app vulnerabilities. They're just thrown into these categories.
Buckets now, aren't they?
Yeah. And on top of that, in 2021, when they were like clearly just going for, hey, let's categorize everything apart from, so in 2021 there was server-side request forgery, literally the only individual vulnerability on the OWASP Top 10 in 2021.
Number 10.
It was number 10. And we're going to talk about that later for a different reason. But they also created insecure design at number 4, which I think just about everyone was like, what? Because arguably, you could just shove any vulnerability that isn't in any of the other 9 categories into insecure design. Yeah, right. Because, what is this category? It's not injection. It's not a cryptographic failure. It's not broken access control. It doesn't go in any. Well, I guess it is insecurely designed because it exists as a vulnerability. So just shove it in number 4, which must have made so many, because I've worked at so many companies that had pen test reporting software where it was silly, even if you weren't doing a web app, you would have to assign an OWASP Top 10 category to a vulnerability. It's like, okay, but this isn't a web, this is a mobile app I'm testing right now. Like this is kind of silly. Or, it is an internal. Why am I doing this? It must have made those companies really happy, because they're like, oh, now, okay, it's fine. Just throw everything in insecure design and be done with it. Yeah. So I agree. It's silly just saying, oh, we test the OWASP Top 10 because it is, 10 things. You want to be testing for more. But at the same time, those 10 things aren't really 10 things anymore. And that's why I don't like the name Top 10, because it's top 10 out of what? Like,
Yeah.
okay, name an 11th category that I can't somehow finagle into one of the 10. Like, I don't think it's possible at this point. They've done so much. They've like done so much compacting of every vulnerability into 10 categories. I'm not sure you could come up with one that I couldn't argue, at least semi-convincingly, Swift, that it belongs somewhere else. Because insecure design is still there. It's number 6 now. But if you come up with a category that's technically not on the OWASP Top 10, I'm like, nah, but it's kind of insecure design, right? There it goes in there.
No, you're absolutely right. And if it doesn't go in there, there'll be one of the other buckets it will probably flop into, arguably. And I know what you're like. You can argue your way out of a paper bag, like literally anything. So I have no interest in taking up that debate. Thank you very much. Because A, I agree with you, and B, this podcast will go on for like another 2 hours. Not that I don't enjoy talking to you, but I do like it from a nice sort of way of being able to focus clients' minds down onto it. And there's also this other aspect of clients going out when they are seeking a pen test. One of the things they will now look for is, do you do testing against the OWASP Top 10 as well? So they're actively looking for that wording. So if you cut it out altogether, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. And there's an interesting post someone, I think we're actually got on the podcast soon, that put up there earlier today or yesterday. I can't remember my time zones, Americans. But it was about calling a pen test a pen test, and about sort of language you use around it, and saying that, you know, what we do is not just a pen test when we go and do a pen test. And again, there's so many different companies out there that bundle all sorts of different things into their penetration testing, rightly or wrongly, that they want to boast about and show difference from, you know, the next pen tester down the road. Should you call it something different? Might not always be a bad idea, because calling it something different, clients aren't going to know what you're talking about, because the likelihood is they've gone to your website or wherever your socials to find a penetration tester to do a pen test, probably because they've got some kind of compliance reason that's forcing them to do it, and that's what they know they need. If you go at them with all kinds of fancy other names that are just applicable to your company, they're not going to know, and they're not going to understand what you're banging on about. So in some ways, like this terminology thing, love it or hate it, sometimes when you're faced with clients the other end, you've got to a little bit to play the ball game, because it's sometimes quite hard to correct them and beat the bad terminology out of them. I try, but they resist.
And like, it's kind of silly too, because OWASP are shooting themselves in the foot a bit. Which, to be fair to OWASP, is something they do quite a lot, I've found. You know, we won't talk about Zap, but it's like anyone who says OWASP Zap now is technically not using the correct term. They lost the entire Zap project. It's now owned by Checkmarks. So, yeah, well done, OWASP. But the problem is, OWASP have 2 other projects, right? So we're talking about telling customers that we test against the OWASP Top 10, right? For security testing. OWASP have 2 other projects that are more relevant and more accurate to say you test against than the OWASP Top 10. And that's the OWASP Web App Security Testing Guide, and I've got it on my screen right now, the OWASP Application Security Verification Standard, ASVS. They have 2 things that are arguably better sort of structured document specs, whatever you want to call them, to test against for web app security than the OWASP Top 10. And yet, I don't see them mentioned hardly anywhere when it comes to pen testing. So it's kind of silly. They have this flagship product, which honestly, I don't think even needs to exist anymore other than marketing. I think at this point, it's just a marketing thing for OWASP because everybody knows what it is. And it's kind of just sat there as their big thing, and it just distracts from the other projects that are actually more useful for people. So that's my other issue with the OWASP Top 10 is it's kind of distracting on top of being kind of pointless now. When you have these, like the OWASP Application Security Verification Standard is incredibly detailed. It really is, and it goes into so much more depth. And then you have like but it never gets any traction.
Yeah.
Whereas OWASP Top 10 will cause endless amounts of celebration that we have a new one, and then people arguing about it for 4 years. Yeah. So
maybe we should
sucks.
do a podcast on the other documents. just do a
I
bit of
would
promotion
love-
for them. That might be a good
love
idea.
to get Jim Manico on the podcast for this. Maybe we'll have to reach out to him and see if he'll talk about ASVS and everything. But yeah, that would be good.
That'd be fun. I think this stuff needs more of a light shined on it for all the reasons we've said so far. It's it has become that sort of go-to name that everyone knows and everyone throws about. And I think once that's established and those names are in place, it's very hard as an industry to, even if something is better or more up to date or more useful, it's very hard to change that terminology amongst the wider IT community. I think it's very problematic. Yeah. I mean, we have it over here in the UK as well, with lots of things like IT health checks as well, which you'll probably remember from your days over here.
Vaguely.
Which is and that terminology gets branded about a lot and sent around an awful lot and misused an awful lot as well by clients coming at you wanting IT health checks, but that can involve a number of different things. And there's always a lot of debate when you start talking to them about what they actually need to do and what they don't need to do. And someone has told them at some point in time they actually need to do an IT health check, and is it actually required or not? So it's reserved basically for doing work with various government agencies, government departments and such. It's meant to cover a certain set of different topics and different pen tests as you go, cover all bases sort of thing. But there's always this debate about what do you actually need versus what have you been told you need, and that terminology just seems to have worked its way in, and you end up talking to them for like 5-10 minutes and you suddenly go, well, actually you don't need an IT health check at all. Why are you asking for a vote? And it's, oh, so-and-so told me when I first started here that that's what we need every year. It's like no one ever checked. It's just become it's like, I don't even know what it stands for. Okay. Perfect.
It's like PCI, right? It's like...
Yeah, PCI as well. Yeah. I need to get a testing done on my CDE. Okay, do you know what that is? No. Excellent. But yeah, it just becomes the go-to terminology that everyone knows, and they sort of forget the actual meaning behind them. My favourite one is, we've spoken about this before, PEN test, as in like a PEN test, like where it's capitalised P, E and N space test. That's my favourite one.
What does the PE and N stand for?
I don't know.
I'm going to hate this.
I assume
you don't know even.
I assume it's some kind of abbreviation someone thinks it stands for. But it's that thing, it's a penetration test. And then everyone just shortened that to pen test. That word gets sent around the office, and then someone goes, I need a pen test. But PEN must stand for something. It can't possibly mean penetration. Tee-hee-hee. So, yeah, they capitalise it. Some kind of abbreviation. I'm going to work up the courage one day to ask someone that comes at me like that on a phone call what they think it stands for.
We should ask our listeners.
Yeah.
What does PEN stand for? Put it in the comments.
I put it out on
a PEN test. What does the pen bit stand for?
Put it out on X after this as a vote or something. We can vote on its actual meaning. I had that once where someone was talking to me about CVSS scores, and they'd got it mixed up with CVEs, and they weren't really sure what it was.
Yeah.
And they kept changing the letters in the acronym as well. So I was like, it was quite a heated debate at the time. I can't remember what it was, some kind of conflict or other. They're trying to get us to change a report, I think it was. I think I said to them along the lines of something like, you keep changing the acronym. Like, do you mean CVE or CVSS? Or which one are you referring to? Because like you're interchanging, you're giving scores to things that shouldn't have scores. There's a letter N has worked its way in here somewhere along the line as well at some point. Yeah, so I'll pluck up the courage to ask one day. What do you think it stands for?
Yeah. I mean, the worst one, which I've been guilty of, I'm pretty sure I was guilty of it earlier in this podcast, is mixing up CVE and CWE.
CWE, yeah.
And the problem is they're related as well, because you can technically assign every CVE a CWE in some way, because that's the whole point of it. But yeah, like CVEs are the well, CWEs are the sort of categories of vulnerability or weakness, and CVEs are the actual weaknesses. So yeah, that's the actual instances of the weaknesses, I should say. They're not even the actual weaknesses. They're the instances of weaknesses. And each CVE has a CVSS score as well. So it's like we have this triangle. It's like a love triangle of vulnerability terms.
Yeah.
They're all just confuses.
So,
because, yeah.
So your PEN test might disclose some CVEs that have CWEs, but also have CVSS scores attached to them. Great. Not confusing at all.
CWEs to categorize them. Yeah. Lovely. Love it. Perfect. It's a great system.
It's a great system, but it speaks volumes to that marketing way of thinking. The OWASP Top 10 is their big thing. It's what they're known for. And I don't know if it will ever go away, despite wanting to bang the drum about other documents and pushing people down those routes and attempting to re-educate the community, re-educate the client base and get them out of habits and things. It's a really, driving change like that is a really difficult thing to do. And it takes a long time as well.
Yeah.
Getting terminology out of the cycle. I would wager that most of those people who are asking for OWASP-based pen tests probably don't know that there's been a new version released in November last year.
Probably.
That would be my... And I would imagine not a lot of them know what exactly is in the top 10 anyway. Like, you can list what's in them. So, yeah, it's just become one of those terms that's just been very used when people are just out there. They're going out to tender and things, I think. So, yes. Did you want to talk about server-side request forgery?
I do, yes.
Oh, you do. I know you do.
How do I segue this?
Look at his little face. He's all happy.
So, server-side request forgery was the last vulnerability on the OWASP Top 10. Like, it was 2021. It was the last standing lone vulnerability that wasn't a category on the OWASP Top 10. And what did they do in 2025, Swift? They put it in a category. And what category did they put it in? Yes, security broken access control. Why? Why would you put it in broken? Like, this is the annoying thing. It's one of those ones where technically I can kind of see it and they might technically be correct. But if they are, it kind of opens up the floodgates. The argument for server-side request forgery being broken access control appears to me to be the point that if you can make the server make a request to something, right, and it's something at the back end, you're not supposed to be able to do that. So even if you can't necessarily see the result of that access, you're still accessing it in some way. So you're still accessing something you shouldn't have been able to access, right? That's, I think, the argument, which kind of makes sense. And it is where it breaks down, though, because you can use server-side request forgery to access publicly available things, right? And then you can pull them into the application and cause other vulnerabilities. Like, I've used a server-side request forgery to pull in a payload, right, like a cross-site scripting payload that I hosted on a publicly available system, and the server-side request forgery pulled it into the current page and created an XSS, right? It's technically a server-side request forgery that causes an XSS, right? It's a chain of vulnerabilities. That's not broken access control. That's just not. The freaking payload was on a publicly available web server that I hosted on the internet. It had to be public because the server has to get to it. So that's not broken access control. So that's why it's not broken access control there. There are more things you can do with server-side request forgery than just accessing back-end information. You can use it to do all sorts of things. The other problem, and this is something I didn't even realize at the time when I looked into it, was back in 2021, when they removed, well, actually, they didn't remove it, but back in 2021, they somehow added cross-site request forgery. They added that to broken access control in 2021, which I didn't even notice. And that kind of makes more sense to be added to broken access control. I don't really think it is still. It's still very strange because the attacker isn't accessing anything with cross-site request forgery. They're causing a victim to access something and change something on their behalf. Like, it really depends on what you really mean by broken access control at the end of the day. I just don't see that as broken access control. That just seems, well, the client user could access it, that they were always supposed to be able to access it. It's just that their browser was forced to make it because you hadn't implemented proper security controls against cross-site request forgery. So that's my thing. But I'll let you respond in 2 seconds. My final point on this is, if server-side request forgery, as in you can cause the server to access something at the back end that you're not supposed to be able to access, if that's broken access control, why isn't SQL injection also broken access control? You can access parts of a database that you're not supposed to be able to access. Is that broken access control? I mean, by the SSRF standard, absolutely. So why don't we just shove everything into broken access control now? Like injection, everything. Just put everything in broken access control, have a top one, and we're done.
So we'll just have 2 categories then: insecure design and broken access control. See, the problem with that, Tibsy, is that the OWASP Top 2 doesn't have the same ring to it as the OWASP Top 10. And if we're going for marketing purposes here, no one's asking for the OWASP Top 2 to be tested. The other thing I quite like on this is I do like some of the new categories added.
Hang on, let's talk about we'll end the podcast by talking about what's good about it.
I'll circle back around to that.
What I want to know your opinions. I want to know your opinions on why SSRF is suddenly broken access control.
I was kind of going to wind them into the same thing, but yes, we'll talk about the other bits at the end. You're right. I should really read show notes. Definitely should do that. Not getting ready to go for a nap and forgetting that there's a podcast going to be happening.
Oh boy.
So I like the new things added, but there are 2 new things in there. And if you add 2 new things and you keep SSRF, it's no longer the top 10, so you have another problem there. So it's got to go as the last standing actual vulnerability on its own. I think before in 2021, it stuck out like a sore thumb as being the only vulnerability left standing. And it always felt to me a little bit like it needed a home to go to. Now, arguably, whether broken access control is the right little home for it to go to,
it's not.
I don't know which other one you'd put it in. That's my other problem. Or whether you need an entirely new category. I don't know what you would call it to house it. Because that's it. That's the other problem, and I think probably why it was isolated in 2021 is because it's really hard to put it in its own individual box. Because, as your example kind of demonstrated, it can fit into multiple boxes, and that's kind of a problem with it. It's like sort of they got into 2021 about we're going to put more things in more buckets because that's neat, because the world of applications is expanding so much. There's not just 10 headline vulnerabilities anymore. There's loads more nowadays, and you've got to account for all of these new things coming in as well. So buckets make sense. Trouble is, some of the vulnerabilities don't sit in with all those buckets, or they spread across multiple buckets. And they are a bit restricted by the fact that it is the OWASP Top 10, and they can't really just make it bigger and just like, oh, there's no room for this and it fits into multiple categories. So we're just going to make it the OWASP Top 11 now. That doesn't make sense either. So I think they're in a bit of a, to be honest, I think they're in a bit of a catch-22 with the whole situation. But yes, I do agree with you. I don't know why it's in a broken access rule. My other beef with this is that if you are going to put it in, if the OWASP Top 10 is meant to be rankings from 1 through to 10 of risk and vulnerabilities and severities, etc., it's now gone from number 10 and now it's in the bucket of something that is at number 1. That's quite a jump from saying, this thing's in the top 10. It's at the bottom, so it's not such a big problem as injection and stuff. But now apparently it's more important than cryptographic failures, injection, and insecure design.
I mean, this is the problem with categorization: is you have stuff like SQL injection, I feel like, being dragged down by the fact that LDAP injection and other kinds of injection just aren't that, risky, because they're just not that, they just don't happen that often. And so, that's the other thing. It's like you have if you expanded out all these categories, you would have this massive mess of overlapping individual vulnerability. Like, I mean, expand them and ordered them appropriately, it would be just a complete mess of arrows. And yeah, it's kind of crazy because you're taking so many vulnerabilities that have already a wide range of risk, and then sort of pushing them all together, averaging that risk, and then arranging those categories into a list by that average risk, which is kind of just not a very sensible thing to do. I think if your ultimate goal is, as it states, a broad consensus about the most critical security risks to web applications, I don't think that's what the OWASP Top 10 is anymore. I don't think there's a broad consensus because I think there's so much disagreement whenever it comes out. I can't imagine how there's any kind of broad consensus. And I don't think it covers the most critical security risks. At least it's not the right order. So it fails on both. I mean, to be fair, it does cover risks to web applications. So well done. Can't argue with that part. It is technically a list of risks to web applications. It's just not a broad consensus, I feel, and it's not the most critical in any kind of order they have it in. Other than maybe broken access control. That's pretty much the only one I think everyone agrees, yeah, that's probably should be at the top. But yeah.
Well,
it's crazy.
I used to think it should be at the top, but now it's got SSRF in it. So,
drag down a little bit.
So I don't know. Maybe it should slip to 2.
The problem is, if security misconfiguration is at the top of the freaking list, nobody's going to take it seriously anymore.
It's such a mess, and I think that will be reflected when we summarize this all at the end of the podcast. Before, however,
let's talk about the 2 new ones.
There's 2 new ones. Yes,
I like one of them. I don't like the other. I think you'll probably know which one I like.
I don't know. You could not like either of them, to be honest, for various reasons.
I like one of them.
So I like software supply chain features.
Failures, you mean?
Failures.
I like features of software supply chains as well.
They are good features.
I like that one. That is the one I like.
In recent years, it's quite. I mean,
literally last year when you had so many software supply chain attacks, it was like, yeah, you kind of have to.
You could almost argue that the failures have become features. I did read it right. But yeah, that's my new favorite one. That's the one I do like, and I saw it and I was like, yes, that makes sense, because there's been so much over the last 1 to 2 years where this has become such big news. There were warnings about it, there were people musing about it, and then it turns out there's just been literally every kind of supply chain issue you can imagine just hit at the sort of mid to back end of last year. So I totally get why that is there. I'm surprised with the advent of so many frameworks and things like that coming along, why this wasn't ever there in any guise before. It's kind of amazing, but I'm glad it is there now.
I think it was you got to remember this, every 4 years they do this.
Yeah.
I would argue, so it's not, in 2021, they're going off the previous 4 years of data. So the question is, from 2017 to 2021, was software supply chains attacks that that popular? And I would say probably not.
No. So this is the interesting thing. Was the risk there and the potential there? Oh yeah, because there were people talking about it, writing blog posts about this is going to happen one day, and lo and behold, it did, because no one did anything about it. So there's that, but no, you're quite right. There wasn't the mass exploitation and the varying degrees of success that went into that. It didn't really hit the big public headlines, did it? So no, I can see why it wouldn't be in there. It's a good point. I just wish it was a bit more foretelling. But hey,
it arguably should be above security misconfiguration. I'm still confused as to what's in security misconfiguration that's that bad that it's the number 2 risk.
Well, it's another really broad topic, isn't it? A really broad bucket of so many things can go into a security misconfiguration. You can even have multiple fairly low severity security misconfigurations that might together add up to be a major security misconfiguration, which just further muddies the water. But no, I like that change, and I'm glad we've now got the data and the attacks have happened in a way to get it on that list, because it's so seriously important. And I think it's been, if you are basing your application testing around just covering what's in the OWASP Top 10, you're going to have missed loads of stuff by not looking and searching for things like that. So yeah, that's problematic for me. The other one down here at the bottom, mishandling of exceptional conditions. What the fuck?
Yeah, that is how you react to that one, to be honest.
I don't know what that means. Like, I put my bowl of cornflakes on the back of my bed this morning. That was a mishandling of the bowl of cornflakes. The exceptional condition was my dog jumped up and he pulled it off the top and it now got like milk all over the bed. That's a mishandling of an exceptional condition.
Yeah.
But so, what's it doing in here?
I'm reading notable CWEs included in this category. Generation of error message containing sensitive information.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that actually no? They did get rid of the other one, which was like, this is the problem. Like, some of these, I feel like they could have put in, there was sensitive information disclosure back in 2017.
Yeah.
So it's kind of that one, I guess. Again, failure to handle missing parameter. Okay. Improper handling of insufficient privileges. Isn't that just access control?
Yeah.
Null pointer dereference, not failing securely. Which I guess insecure design, technically. Not failing securely, isn't that insecure design? Like, this is the problem. I just don't think it's, like, that's the one you chose to replace, server-side request forgery, or potentially, like, mess up. You could have had other things in there, I swear. Yeah. But yeah. And also, the other thing, the one I'm really annoyed by is I don't know if I would class security logging and alerting failures as a web app security issue. That always, and this may just be me, but that always just seems kind of tangential to the actual security of the web app itself. Like, logging and alerting, isn't that something you do separate? You would do separately to a web app? Like, maybe.
So this is going to open up a whole can of worms.
Yeah, because we're talking. You got to understand, when I talk about web apps, I'm purely thinking about the application running on the server and the application running in the browser, right? And to a degree, the communication between the browser and the server is, I guess the question is, like, having a WAF in front of that, is that part of the web app? Is that part of web app security? Kind of, I guess. Does it belong in its own sort of category? I'm not sure.
I think this very much depends on how you view an application environment, and possibly even your role within cybersecurity, to be honest. So if you're purely coming at it from a testing point of view and you want to test the application, the underlying application, then you probably want as few things in the way as possible, like WAFs and such. So no, WAF wouldn't be part of the application. But if you zoom out a bit and you go, well, I own this environment, I'm the application owner. Is a WAF part of my application environment? Yes. Is logging and monitoring that application, its logs and everything that goes on behind the scenes, in case you have an incident you need to investigate one day against your application? Yes, I can see how that could be part of your application. So I can.
Yeah, you're correct.
I like that. Oh, wait, can we get that on a soundbite? I'd like that on like a. I'm going to put that on a soundboard or something.
The problem is I'm constantly thinking of things from a testing perspective, and like, to OWASP's credit, they do say it's for developers and web application security in general. So yeah, it does make sense. I just feel like it might be just too small of a category.
Well, how much? The other thing is cryptographic flaws, right? I mean, a lot of those are enforced at the server level as well. So is that part of the application?
I think it's for a tester. It's easier to see because we don't see the logging side of things. That's the thing. We don't see the alerting side of things. But I can measure how good your TLS is. I can test SSL.sh it. So I think it's part of that. From a testing perspective, it's more obvious. But yeah, you're right. The security logging. I just think honestly, you could potentially merge a few of these, or put security logging and alerting failures into something else. I mean, arguably, it could be even an insecure design. the whole design of the environment.
So we're now down to the OWASP Top 9. But it is. It's
well, no, but you could have something there instead. I don't know what you could have something there instead. It just seems like it's too small of a category to just be there. And you could potentially bring back server-side request forgery. rescue that from the depths of broken access control.
Bring it back.
It's just, I don't know. It's
sort of the outlier in all of these things, isn't it? It's the one that doesn't really fit. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's another revision of it in a few years' time and that then goes and gets built up into something else. Insecure design might be an interesting place for it to go, because you're then talking about insecure design of the application and the environment. But how concerned should the OWASP Top 10 be of the environment behind it before it basically just becomes a build review? Because if you're saying to someone you've got to do, as part of an application test, you're expecting someone to do analysis of your logging and alerting capabilities on that individual server, that's a build review. Like, that involves someone logging onto a server and checking configuration of of all of your security logging and alerting features. Like, that's not a simple web app job. That's an infrastructure build review at that point. So where does, I feel like that line's getting a little bit blurred in this OWASP Top 10 malarkey for my liking.
And that neatly, before we end the episode, neatly brings us back to one of the points you made earlier about it being part of the, we test the OWASP Top 10. We don't anymore, at least for pen testing. Okay, do we test broken access control, security misconfiguration? Yes. Software supply chain failures? No, because we don't have access to that data usually. We don't have access to the source code. Like 99.999% of web app pen tests do not have access to the source code. We don't know usually what kind of third-party libraries you're bringing in, right? Client-side stuff, JavaScript, whatever. But we're not testing like Node.js libraries loaded in the build process, right? Cryptographic failures, injection, insecure design, sure. Authentication failures, sure. Software data integrity failures, yes. Security logging and alerting failures, not really. Can't do it. And mishandling of exceptional conditions, I mean, I guess in some cases, but a lot of the time, no. So, yeah.
Some of this might go down to things like individual company's definition of what's involved in a pen test as well, what's involved in a web app test. Do you do build reviews as part of that? Because the other thing is, you got to think of like the cost to clients as well. If we start bolting on build reviews and analysis of like your software supply chain issues that you might have underneath, because that's not just going to be looking at versions of various different software and packages you have installed. That's going to be going down to the depths of like developer practice as well. And how are they actually managing and controlling which NPM packages they've included in what? And are they tracking versions of XYZ? And that then becomes an audit. Like, how far down does this rabbit hole go? So, to round all of this stuff off, I think it's just, the OWASP 10 was a great idea. I still like referring to it. I don't think it has a purpose anymore in the world. I think its purpose has been a bit diluted, and I think they themselves have come up and included other things that should be superseding it, which are vastly more useful. But I think the OWASP Top 10 marketing behemoth that it is has just become the known standard, the known terminology, and it's in a catch-22. It's in a hole. So yeah, I don't think we can test against it anymore and legitimately say we're testing everything on it anymore. So it's a really tricky hole sort of been backed into, I think. So yeah, maybe we'll start talking about all those other documents and do another podcast on those and the benefits of them. Maybe we'll start the revolution.
I mean, and on that note, when I write up findings and I put references in, there's usually a point where you link to other, documents out on the web, whether it's, a CVE or a CWE, right, category to explain something. I don't think I've ever linked to an OWASP Top 10 sort of individual category article. It's always been the OWASP cheat sheets, right? Because they have these prevention cheat sheets, which is another project, right? That is somewhat overblown, but it's somehow shadowed. That's the right word.
Overshadowed,
It's somehow
yeah.
shadowed by the OWASP Top 10. Is these amazing cheat sheet guides, and they're prevention cheat sheet guides. So they're purposely written for developers to be like, don't do it this way, do it this way instead. Or here are 10 ways you could code this. Or, which is great. I've never linked to an OWASP Top 10 individual like category article, which they do have. So it is just the marketing at this point. It's a massive marketing exercise, whereas the marketing really should be on the cheat sheets, on the testing guide, on the AV. I forget the name of it because I don't.
Don't use
I know
it. Yeah,
the ASVS, Application Security Verification Standard. I know about it, but in my brain it's like OWASP Top 10. That's it. Like,
yeah.
That's like it's like you could do that round of like word association with all hackers. You say OWASP Top 10 is technically 2 words, but like that's the word association that happens with OWASP, unfortunately, which is unfair to the other projects. And
it is, because they got some fantastic stuff going on. And if you sit down and look through all the like variety of things OWASP cover, and again, not a lot of it's not isolated even just to web applications. It covers a lot of stuff, which is cool.
Mm-hmm. And it's being actively developed, which unlike the old Top 10 comes out every 4 years. I don't know why. I don't know why it comes out every 4 years. Like, arguably, that should have stopped at least, maybe 10 years ago. We should have been getting one every year or every 2. 4 years just seems a bit silly. But there we go.
This whole thing is about progression and progressing the world that we work in, progressing testing. And I feel like with the OWASP Top 10, we're just kind of stagnating into this. We must categorize everything into very strict 10 categories when the world around it has expanded exponentially. Yeah. Well, look at the world we're in now. AI, LLMs flying around the place. And there's going to be stuff like that's probably going to appear at some point in time.
Vibe coding's going to be on the OWASP Top 10.
If that doesn't go in at like
2029,
it's going to supersede broken access control as number 1. Yeah, it's got to be something that will work its way in there at some point. But yeah, it's had its time. There you go.
Mm-hmm. This is the podcast that killed OWASP Top 10. No,
you're welcome, OWASP. I don't want to kill OWASP. OWASP do some amazing things.
OWASP Top 10.
Yeah, we should caveat that and just say, look, we love OWASP. OWASP do some incredible things. We just want to see more of those incredible things and less of the things that were relevant like 20 years ago. It's just being rehashed. Yeah, that's my piece said.
Good way to end the episode.
Thank you.
Well, thank you everyone for listening. I've been Tib3rius. He's been Andy Swift. This has been Across the Pondcast. You can find all of our social media links in the episode description or on acrossthepondcast.net. And we will see you next time.
Fare thee well, OWASP Top 10ers.